As lawmakers continue trying to figure out how to keep the government open, the president is promising to build a border wall with Mexico one way or the other. That may involve some tricky accounting, but it's not impossible. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said Tuesday that the administration is looking into different funding sources to come up with the $5 billion in border wall funding the president has called for.
Top Democrats hit back on that assessment. Here is Minority Leader Chuck Schumer this morning on the Senate floor.
The president's spokesperson has claimed that the administration can reprogram funds given to other areas of the government to build the full wall. Let me be very clear. The administration cannot reprogram funds appropriated by Congress for the full wall without our assent. To do so would violate Congress's Article I powers. They cannot do it on their own, and the House and Senate will not approve a wall.
Schumer there from his standpoint making very clear that funding across agencies could not be made available to build a wall in its entirety, but the White House maintains it's looking at every avenue, and here to help us break it all down and to find out if it's possible is our chief political analyst, David Brody. David, break it down. Is this possible at all for him to find this roundabout workaround, if you will?
He's going to try, for sure, and he's going to have to figure it out pretty quickly. Definitely, he's got a year. He's got 2019 to figure it out, and then he goes on the campaign trail, and he better have some money for it. Look, I think the way this is going to work, folks, Jenna and John, who are you exactly?
Multiple personalities.
Exactly, is through the military. He's going to look to the military. Let's take a look at a couple options. Okay, first of all, he might use some of the money from the Defense Department's counter-narcotics funding that currently amounts to just over $500 million. The Pentagon's funding is supposed to be counter-narcotics operating programs, so maybe the defense somehow gets in there. Number two, a second way he could do this. This is also, once again, without congressional approval. He could use some of the emergency military construction money. It's called MILCON. It's up to about $50 million, not much, and it can be used without congressional approval, as we said, in cases of national security. Now, the third option is interesting. Use funding of the Emergency Military Construction Fund, that's called MILCON, with no spending cap. In other words, he can spend as much as he wants, but he has to say it is for a national emergency. And if you notice, he's been using those words, national emergency, a lot. So that's interesting. Finally, this is the one I think he may go with, using funds allocated for the Army Corps of Engineers by declaring a national emergency. $10 billion, $10 billion in unused funds there. I think that's the place to look right now.
Double the amount that he's calling for right now.
That's right. That's right.
Well, speaking of doubling, President doubling down, David, the president, he took to Twitter to double down on something that he's said before, and this is a quote on Twitter. The president tweets, "Mexico is paying indirectly for the wall through the new trade deal with Mexico and Canada." How can he say that?
Well, I think he might have confused the verb tense because he said is. Hold on for a moment. Congress hasn't approved it yet, so how can it actually be happening? So that's inaccurate. But what he is trying to say, if he changed the verb tense to say could be or will or in the future, that's the point, that the idea between the trade deficit we have with Mexico now comparing to what he believes the trade deficit will be after this deal is implemented could be anywhere from $15 to $20 billion of savings. And he believes that savings can somehow, some way, basically say that Mexico will pay for the wall.
All right, David Brody, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Well, American troops are returning from Syria. That came as a big surprise announcement from the White House today. The president tweeted the reason the administration plans to bring home around 2,000 service members, saying, quote, "We have defeated ISIS in Syria, my only reason for being there during the Trump presidency." The U.S. got involved in Syria back in 2014, launching airstrikes there. Since then, American troops started partnering with Syrian ground forces to fight ISIS extremists. The Pentagon recently said ISIS now only controls just 1% of the territory it originally held during the Syrian civil war. A senior administration official says they believe the remaining pocket of ISIS can be eliminated by regional partner forces.
Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Andrew Gable from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. Andrew, today's White House announcement came as a bit of a surprise. What do you think this was prompted by?
I think the president's view is that he campaigned on removing all troops in Syria. He now has, or he believes he has an opening to make good on that promise, and he's exercising his legal authority to remove the troops from Syria.
When you heard the news, what was your initial reaction?
It came, as you said, as a surprise. As recently as Monday afternoon, the special envoy to Syria, Ambassador Jim Jeffrey, had reiterated the long-term U.S. presence in Syria. What has been the administration policy for the last few months is that there are 3 thresholds that have to be met simultaneously to remove U.S. presence in the east. Those 3 thresholds are the defeat of ISIS, not just as a territorial entity, but as an organization, the removal of Iran's proxy forces and ground troops, and a political process that is a political reform process from the Assad regime that is in accordance with UN Resolution 2254. As of today, not only are those 3 thresholds not met, not one of them is met. And so this does come as a very sudden 180-degree change of strategy from the president.
I would imagine that's why we've already seen from members of the president's own party a little bit of backlash. Senator Lindsey Graham saying, characterizing this as an Obama-like mistake. Thoughts on that?
Well, one does remember President Obama's decision to pull every last troop out of Iraq in 2011, having campaigned to do so. If that is the new strategy, I think one might benefit from looking at what the practical results of that strategy in Iraq were in 2011. The removal of the U.S. troops meant the removal of U.S. political influence. There was a power vacuum that followed the precipitous withdrawal, and that power vacuum was filled with Iran and ISIS. And I think that if the U.S. were to similarly remove its troops from Syria, it would lose all its political leverage in Syria, and the territory that's now controlled by U.S.-backed proxy forces, the Syrian Democratic Forces, would fall into the hands of Iran, Assad, Russia, and Turkey.
How much does Turkey factor into this?
Well, what's interesting is that President Erdogan of Turkey and President Trump had a phone call on Friday. And according to an unnamed U.S. official, it was on the basis of this phone call that Trump began to rethink what had been a fairly consistent U.S. strategy. President Erdogan in recent days has been threatening to conduct military operations cross-border from Turkey to Syria because of what he perceives to be existential threats coming from Kurds on the Syrian side of the border. Kurds, who I might add, dominate the U.S.-backed ground proxy, the SDF.
Yeah, they've been our allies.
They have been. And so it looked like there was this military crisis brewing. Erdogan and Trump share a phone conversation on Friday. What's interesting is on Monday, Jim Jeffries reaffirms the strategy, reaffirms the previous strategy, I should say, the commitment to the East. But then today, Trump announces unilateral withdrawal. And so I don't pretend to have any insider knowledge on what's happening inside the administration, but it does seem that there has been a fundamental change of thinking, at least as far as the president goes.
You hear a lot of Republican lawmakers blasting the president for this announcement, but then there are others too who do support it, like Rand Paul. He was saying he's very supportive of this decision and saying that, you know, the United States is so many places, and that at some point we do have to pull out of different areas. What do you say to that line of reasoning?
Yeah, well, I think Rand Paul actually represents a minority within the Republican caucus. From the reaction I've seen, there's been unanimous skepticism of the unilateral withdrawal. Senator Paul is right that we have a global military presence. It's not clear that the 2,000 troops we have in Syria are low return on investment troops. In fact, I would argue they're amongst them. They generate the highest return on investment because of their political significance, which I touched on before. And I want to emphasize that the U.S. presence in Syria is really nothing like its presence in Iraq. We had over 100,000 troops in Iraq for years upon years on end. We're taking hundreds of casualties a year. It's nothing like this in Syria. I mean, this is really a drop in the bucket in terms of our aggregate force structure. And so even though the troops there are highly elite and they're doing a tremendous job and they punch above their weight, it's not bleeding the U.S. Either literally or bleeding its treasury the way Iraq was. I would argue that we can afford to do what we have to do in eastern Syria, especially given how favorable the situation is right now relative to the alternative, which could easily be a repeat of Iraq. And then you're looking at a situation in which Iran functionally controls territory from the west border of Afghanistan all the way to the Mediterranean Sea.
Andrew Gable with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, thank you for helping us make sense of this.
Thank you very much.
Speaker of the House Paul Ryan says goodbye to Capitol Hill. More on his last day as a member of Congress later in today's show.
Are you currently on Medicare? In other words, do you carry the red, white, and blue Medicare card? If so, are you suffering from chronic back pain or knee pain? If you answered yes, you may be eligible for a pain-relieving back brace or knee brace covered by Medicare at little to absolutely no cost to you.
Call 800-358-5058 right now to see if you qualify.
These professional-grade back braces are ideal for lower back pain, rheumatoid and osteoarthritis, spinal disorders, stenosis, and other painful back problems. Our medical-grade durable knee braces are designed for those with osteoarthritis and general knee pain and weakness. Our accredited staff will handle all of the Medicare paperwork, and best of all, your brace is shipped directly to your home for free. Will you qualify for a Medicare-covered back brace or knee brace? There's only one way to find out.
Call the Back and Knee Brace Center at 800-358-5058. That's 800-358-5058.
Are you or a loved one between the ages of 50 to 80 years old? If you are younger than 80 years old, do you receive Social Security, disability, or Medicare? If you answered yes, you may qualify for $30,000 in funeral insurance for only pennies a day. The average funeral costs around $11,000, and Social Security only pays $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the balance. Call now to see if you qualify for $30,000 in funeral expense coverage from Senior Legacy Life. Your rate will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and there is no medical exam, even if you have a pre-existing disease or illness. Don't be a financial burden to your family. Lock in your rate by completing an application over the phone right now. Will you qualify for funeral insurance up to $30,000 for only pennies a day? Find out for free by calling Senior Legacy Life.
Call 1-800-914-7690. That's 1-800-914-7690. 1-800-914-7690.
Well, the U.S. deficit is soaring as the economy booms. Right now, the U.S. national debt is more than $21.8 trillion and climbing.
This after unemployment fell to its lowest in decades. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy sat down with Deputy Director at the Office of Management and Budget to uncover the case for the cause for the spike. Ben, what did he have to say?
Well, John and Jenna, you could say D.C. is in the midst of a bipartisan spending spree, which clearly is not the way to go since the federal budget deficit is projected to hit $1 trillion this fiscal year. Washington racked up a $305 billion deficit in October and November alone. That's up from $202 billion during the same time last year. Major deficits like that are expected to drive the $21 trillion national debt to $33 trillion within 10 years. As John was saying, I just spoke to Russell Vogt, the Deputy Director of the Office of Budget and Management. He's now taking charge of the agency since OMB Director Mick Mulvaney shifted his focus to his new role as White House Chief of Staff. He said that the rising debt, yes, is a major problem, but that taxpayers should not foot the bill to offset the rising debt. Russ, what do you say for people calling out for demands for tax increases to kind of offset the debt?
Well, this is where we would have a dispute with them. We don't think that the revenue side is where the problem is. You look at what Americans spend in food, clothing, and shelter, and it amounts to about $4.6 trillion, right? We don't think that, and that's generally what we spend in terms, or what we take in revenue. We don't want to cause them, the American family, the American taxpayer, to have to absorb a greater share of responsibility.
Now, Vos says one way to possibly resolve this is to find programs that are no longer used or inefficient. He also calls on Congress to practice restraint on spending. In just the last 2 years, Washington paid out more than $450 billion in interest payments on the national debt. Now, with the Fed raising rates half a point, he can add another $100 billion to those payments each year. Now, I asked Vogt what impact his faith has had during his time at the OMB. Now, take a listen.
Day to day, it is who I am. My faith is incredibly important to me. I can't actually answer the question because I don't divorce the two. So it gets into how I treat people, to how I think about issues, and it's incredibly important to me.
Federal borrowing continues to rise thanks to Congress voting to suspend the debt ceiling earlier this year. The government won't face any borrowing limit until March of 2019. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Well, coming up, the Federal Reserve's latest decision on raising interest rates.
Do you support the president? Do you support Trump's tax plan? Are you concerned it will affect your retirement income in a post-Trump era?
Help protect your financial future and call Annuity General for your complimentary book. From a leading financial firm that shows you ways to not run out of money, whether the market goes up or down. This free book reveals little-known secrets about annuity strategies in simple-to-understand terms that can protect your money for a lifetime. As a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report summarizing the rates and benefits of annuities from hundreds of top-rated insurers, helping you find ways to get up to 33% more income in retirement. Invaluable advice for an uncertain age. That's right, 2 books both absolutely free for calling Annuity General. Help protect your financial future.
Call 800-216-0342. That's 800-216-0342. Call now.
Attention! If you currently do not get health insurance through your employer, or if you do not have health insurance, or if you just got divorced or married, had a baby, moved, or lost your health insurance coverage, listen closely. You are eligible for a new health care plan using Health Insurance America. A family of 4 can make up to $97,000 a year and still qualify for a new health care plan. Get coverage for doctor visits, prescriptions, hospital, dental, and vision for as little as $25 a week with copays as low as $0. Health insurance rates have nearly doubled in the last 3 years. Stop paying the rising cost of traditional major medical and learn how Health Insurance America is saving people thousands of dollars a year on their health care plans. Don't waste hours on the phone or on a government website. Talk to a live healthcare consultant right now.
Call 1-800-940-5020. That's 1-800-940-5020. 1-800-940-5020.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Bring home a miracle this holiday season with Superbook's newest episode, Jesus Feeds the Hungry.
I have never seen a miracle this great.
Superbook Jesus Feeds the Hungry. Yours when you join the Superbook Club. And if you act by December 31st, you'll receive 3 copies of The First Christmas is Our Way of Saying Thanks. Plus, call now to receive 3 copies of the all-new Superbook Fun-Filled Activity Book, Jesus Feeds the Hungry. Available now.
Welcome back. The Federal Reserve is set to raise interest rates for the 4th time this year. The move points to an overall strong economy. Their quarter-point hike will take interest rates to a range of 2.25% to 2.5%. That's the highest rate since 2008. The increase will mean higher borrowing costs for many consumers and businesses. The Fed updated forecast projects just 2 rate hikes next year, down from 3 the Fed predicted in September.
Well, it was that news from the Fed sent Wall Street on another downward dive at the closing bell, losing all gains it had throughout the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down about 350 points. The S&P 500 fell 1.4%. Well, Paul Ryan is saying goodbye to Congress today after 3 years as the Speaker of the House, a 2012 vice presidential run, and some 2 decades as a representative for Wisconsin.
Speaking at the Library of Congress, where he first laid out his vision to fix America's entitlement programs, Ryan called the failure to overhaul those programs our great unfinished business. Ryan oversaw major changes to the tax code after the passage of last year's signature tax cut bill.
Well done is always a better pursuit than well said, isn't it? In this business, you catch slings and arrows. It is a price that I have been happy to pay, because nothing is as fulfilling as pursuing an idea that will truly make a difference in people's lives and seeing it through from start to finish.
Yeah, and Ryan told CBN News earlier this year that his faith is an integral part of his life as a husband, father, and Speaker of the House.
The Speaker announced this spring that he would not run for re-election, saying that he wanted his children to remember him more than just a weekend dad. And I think that's a pretty good reason to want to kind of slow things down, hit the pause button, and spend more time with the family.
20 years. It's a lot of service.
Long time. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.